We are at Third Degree Glass Factory in St. Louis, Missouri. We are hosting the Mississippi River Watershed Partnership Workshop.
We're going to have about 125 people here, all thinking about the importance of this great river system.
It's a very, very important time for watershed-wide collaboration.
This system requires hundreds of organizations to actually maintain connection with each other.
The Mississippi River Watershed is huge. It covers more than half of the United States. 31 states are part of the watershed.
All that water that's falling on that land flows into a central place, and that central place is the Mississippi River.
The idea that the effects of what they might do in the upper watershed affects the lower watershed has been a foreign concept, but people are beginning to understand that.
Over the last couple of years, there's been huge investments from the federal government, and we've been asking ourselves the question, was the Mississippi River and everyone that cares about the river poised to help advocate and bring those resources to bear for the benefit of the river? So we want to bring everyone together. We want to form a partnership that's going to make us stronger and ready for the next time that comes around.
There's an opportunity for all of us to work together to conserve this great watershed, and workshops like this are important for us to compare notes, to figure out where the opportunities are. And we've got to work together to manage it, to make sure that we're doing the things we need to do to improve commerce on the river, but at the same time, conservation, protection of natural resources.
The watershed includes people from all walks of life and all interests. And without all of those perspectives, we're not going to be able to successfully move forward.
With the changing climate, the changing water flows, is critical for us to figure out how to sustain this river and create more resilience for future generations.
If you care about the river, feel free to reach out, feel free to connect. We'd love to have your support and your engagement as we really flesh out and co-create and build this partnership together.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kim Lutz. I am the Executive Director for America's Watershed Initiative. We are an NGO working across all 31 states of the Mississippi River to inform science and decision-making and to develop partnerships. I'm joined by Sierra Shucard on our team, as well as the team from the Nature Conservancy, Liz Crow and Emma Engelman. We'll introduce others as we get started. But I wanted to start with just a little bit of background. In looking at the over 200 people who registered for the call today, I recognize that some of you have been on this journey with us for many months, many workshops, webinars, and meetings, and others of you were meeting for the first time this morning. So we thought it would be good to spend just a moment on the story of how we've gotten to this point. And you saw a little bit of that in the video that we just showed. So as my organization, again, America's Watershed Initiative, or AWI, and the Nature Conservancy pondered how to get our hands around this enormous watershed, 31 states, the fourth largest watershed by area, and the top 10 in the world by volume and length. We thought there needs to be something that brings us all together. And in fact, it is the only large watershed in the United States without formal coordination of programmatic activities and comprehensive dedicated funding across all of its subbasins. We recognize there are great programs up and down the Mississippi and its major tributaries, but what we're really looking at is that collective whole to coordinate across all the subbasins and to bring more funding, more attention, more coordinated action to this basin. So that was the starting point of what has been, again, several months of conversation of what this partnership might look like and how we might create it together. Next slide, please. So, beginning with the end goal in mind, we set out to build a diverse and robust coalition across many sectors, represented in our many meetings and in a recent workshop in St. Louis, included folks from all levels of government, federal, state, and local. It included folks from agriculture, from the inland navigation community, from national and local NGOs, from academic institutions throughout the watershed. So we want to bring as big a tent together as possible to develop shared priorities across the entire watershed. That said, and I say it often, we want to build on those existing initiatives. We know there is a lot of good work that is already happening. There are institutions in portions of the watershed that are working well. We want to build on those and create this coalition that will act as a voice for the watershed to bring, again, dedicated funding, integrated on the ground action, because we know we have a ways to go to improve the health of the watershed and the human and natural communities that depend upon it. Next slide. So what might be a model for that partnership that would work for a basin of this size? Well, we also recognize there's nothing like the Mississippi River in the United States. Its scope, its scale is just unique. So a unique watershed needs a unique approach and one that we build together. We also recognize that there are vast differences between the 5 subwatersheds, as well as a whole bunch of commonalities. So how do we acknowledge those differences as well as those shared goals and actions across the various sub-watersheds of the Mississippi River? And we think we've got a great example. We have many great examples, but I'll highlight one this morning with the Upper Mississippi River Basin Association, UMRBA, where we have 5 states with gubernatorial appointees from high levels and state agencies that work together with the UMRBA staff, an NGO that supports that work across specific action items and specific do outs agreed to by those 5 states. That's one example of a structure that we hope to build upon. And that kind of structure could be a model for other parts of the basin. We've also looked at a whole bunch of other structures. We've looked at federal structures like the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, GLRI, and the Chesapeake Bay Initiative. We've also looked at collaborations like the Longleaf Alliance and many, many others across the United States and across other river systems around the world. But again, our goal is to create this together. Next slide. But what this collaboration will be, in large part, depends on the areas we collectively believe are important to take action upon. So in the theory that form follows function, we've been thinking quite a lot about 5 issue areas: improving water quality, mitigating the impacts of floods and droughts, improving inland navigation and associated infrastructure, conserving fish and wildlife resources, and providing opportunities for recreation. Underlying all of those 5 is a desire to improve the science and access to data and actionable information, and to do so in a way that engages historically marginalized communities up and down the watershed and to the east, the watersheds that feed the Mississippi to the east and west. So that's going to be the focus of our discussion today. Next slide. And we started this work back in June in St. Louis as a workshop where, again, many of you today were present, where we brought people together to really think about new leadership models across the basin and to develop relationships. We had many folks who were coming from a particular basin who'd never had the opportunity to chat with folks in another part of the watershed. So that was really transformative for many people. It also reaffirmed the possibility and the recognition of the value of building that partnership across the whole watershed. and what outcomes for change could be achieved through such a collaboration. It brought together information about the watershed and its issues, and started this set of goals that you'll see more about today. If you were not at that meeting, we'll show a slide at the end that has a link where you can go to that workshop proceedings. Next slide. And just, I wanted to show that slide of all the people that attended. It was just a wonderful group of individuals who really poured out their hearts to really think about this watershed in a different way. And you'll see some of that work that continues on from that meeting today through the goals and actions. So before we get to those goals and actions, I'm going to introduce our facilitator, Heather, to come on screen. Heather will be leading us. Heather Yando has been helping throughout the work on developing the work groups for the goals and actions, and will be facilitating through a workshop coming up this January that I'll share a little bit about later. Heather.
Thanks so much, Kim. Hello, everyone. Thanks to all of you who participated in the in-person workshop and as well in our conversations over the past couple of months about goals and actions. So we are now going to hear from leaders in each of these goals and actions subsets. You should have received earlier a copy of the slides for today. So if you want to go deep, if it's helpful to have your own copy of these goals and actions, please look for them there. But I think I'm going to turn it back over to Kim to introduce our first speaker.
Great. So kicking us off with the water quality group is Melanie Arnold. Melanie is an environmental science with the Kentucky Energy and Environment Cabinet in the Division of Water. So thank you, Melanie. And we can go to the water quality slide.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Coming through? Okay, great. Well, thank you for this opportunity to share some of the discussion that we had in the water quality work group. And I'm going to share what I remember from as best as I can recall. So just a disclaimer there. But the water quality work group, as you can see, included representatives from a number of different state agencies, as well as the US EPA, and university represented, the National Wildlife Federation. And I also know we had a few representatives from the Lower Mississippi River Conservation Committee. And apologies if I missed any of the other groups that may have been represented. And I would suggest that the selected goals align with and support the goals of other groups in this larger basin that also have a focus on water quality. Just thinking in terms of like the Upper Mississippi River Basin Association, the Lower Mississippi River Conservation Committee, the Ohio River Basin Alliance, the Epoxy Task Force, and many more. And overall, our emphasis, I would say, is on obtaining the data needed on contaminants and other factors that are impacting water quality to inform planning and decision making that aids in improving water quality. And just diving into the goals some more, we identified reducing nitrogen and phosphorus as high priorities, and also managing those sediment loads appropriately. Emerging contaminants have been coming up more and more in the news as a concern. So being able to have better understanding where those can be found and to be able to manage and reduce those as appropriate is also important. And then to effectively identify and manage these contaminants, we recognize a need to build additional water quality monitoring capacity. And we recognize in the group that there are significant data gaps, as well as challenges in effectively sharing and analyzing data across the different monitoring programs. And as we build this better collaborative understanding of water quality across the basin, one of the questions that comes up is how do we work together effectively at such a large scale and build upon those existing efforts to improve water quality. And I think that's where the fourth bullet with the plan comes in to help identify and reach an agreement on more specific priorities and have that as a basis to begin to build upon for outreach, communication, and buy-in to advance goals for the basin. There were a variety of action items that were brainstormed during our meeting, and a few that were prioritized included that recognition for a need for increased as well as sustained investment and coordination for the monitoring and data collection. And then also, if you're working from a basin-wide perspective, then it could be helpful to think on a broader scale in terms of what we may be able to achieve through that collaboration. But there was also some acknowledgement that implementation strategies on the ground may need to have a more localized component to be successful. And then finally, there was a recognition that there are a lot of different data sets that would be needed to inform this effort, and many of them already do exist. So having access to a shared inventory of activities to improve water quality can be really helpful and also serve as a basis for identifying areas where more focus may be needed. And of course, this is all just a starting point for additional discussion in the future.
Thank you so much, Melanie. I really appreciate it. So next up is our Floods and Droughts group. So on behalf of the Floods and Droughts group, we're going to have Jason Knopf from the University, St. Louis University. Jason is the Associate Director of the Water Institute and the Director of Freshwater Policy for the National Great Rivers Research and Education Center. Thanks so much, Jason.
Great. Thanks, Kim. And thanks to everybody in the group that worked on this. So we had a nice diverse representation in our group. So you can see we had folks from the Army Corps of Engineers, Missouri DNR, American Flood Coalition, the Nature Conservancy, Tulane, NOAA, St. Louis University, and National Great Rivers, Minnesota DNR, FEMA, and the Kansas Water Office. So thematically, some of our primary goals represented the idea that recognizing how important the ongoing monitoring is within the basin and how important it is to support that monitoring into the future. And in many ways, this is a data science and modeling issue because we need to understand what's happening in the future. And to do that, it really is an issue of leveraging the data that's already been collected through monitoring and using that in a modeling framework to try and understand what's going to happen in the future and how we can adapt to those changes and be resilient. And then finally, this is really a complex system that we're dealing with. So there are environmental systems, there's economic systems, there's social systems. And so getting a little bit more deeper into our particular goals, again, we really need to think about this whenever we're dealing with future floods and droughts and trying to think about remediation, that any sort of efforts that we make are going to include impacts on economic, social, health, and ecological systems across the basin. And so this is a complex issue. And we really need to have an interdisciplinary framework when we move forward with these issues. And again, we have an abundance of monitoring data, and these data need to be maintained and supported and leveraged within a modeling framework. And so, we're in a non-stationary climate, and so we can't use past events to understand what's going to happen in the future. We need to be proactive with modeling efforts and data science efforts to try and understand which areas might be most susceptible to droughts and floods and how we can remediate or adapt to those issues as we move forward. So, and we focused quite a bit on nature-based solutions and how they can be leveraged to deal with these issues, to deal with floods and droughts. And the most important thing about this is they need to be durable. So they need to be effective now, but they need to be effective 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. And that's where leveraging our available data with modeling can be beneficial. And finally, I think this is probably an issue across all the groups, but it's really critical that we improve collaborations among different parts of the basin. And so that I'll hand it off to the next. Thank you.
Super. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it. And next up, we have our Fish and Wildlife group. And speaking for the Fish and Wildlife group will be Angie Rogers. Angie is the coordinator of the Lower Mississippi River Conservation Committee. She also serves as the project leader for the Lower Mississippi River Fish and Wildlife Conservation Office for U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Thanks, Angie.
Thank you, Kim. Good morning, everyone. So for our group, the Fish and Wildlife Work Group, I would say if you had to categorize kind of the way we thought about our, put together our goals and actions, it was really kind of a data and science needs focus, more so than a communications or an advocacy focus that you might see or hear from some of the other groups. You can see our work group composition on the left side of the screen there. So we did have a couple of individual states represented. We had tribal representation, a few federal agencies, and then you had 3 multi-state partnership coordinators, myself being one of those. And so I think I can speak on behalf of those 3 of us that we want to make sure that we do get the appropriate state management interest review of this and making sure that it fits in kind of with what resonates with those managers on both the fish and the wildlife side. In terms of our priority goals, I think, there's a general recognition that, we're not trying to return the Mississippi River watershed to, some pre-civilized era of condition, but really how can we make this the best, most functional system that's carrying the complement of the structure and function from an ecosystem perspective. But we also are recognizing, the importance of this watershed. It supports numerous key societal needs, efficient and reliable transportation of commerce, whether that's food, mineral resources, raw materials, flood risk reduction, just to name a few. So how can we best fit into this system and make it the most sustainable as possible? So from our priority goals, we talked about conserving and managing native species, the biodiversity of those, and looking at high value habitats upon which those rely. And included in that, I want to mention that we did talk about listed species, those that are covered under the Endangered Species Act, and we fully recognize the importance in the D or down listing of those species that bear those protections. And so I would say that's kind of nested within that top goal. As well as including invasive species management and control, and, doing that so that we're best conserving and managing our native species as well. We talked a lot about connectivity, lateral and longitudinal connectivity in rivers and floodplains to benefit aquatic and wetland systems. So thinking about lateral connectivity between a river or stream and its floodplain, and then that longitudinal connectivity to allow for the movement of species, including those that migrate long distances. And then finally, improving physical structure and ecological function of the river and its watershed. And I think that somewhat ties into that first goal. I think those are somewhat linked. When we thought about our actions, I think there's kind of different levels of these within what we came up with as a starting point anyway. There were some overarching actions such as identifying a partner list for the various geographies and skill sets to determine the best approach to reach those goals. So things that work on the lower Mississippi River may not make sense for the upper Mississippi or for the Ohio or the Arkansas. They're very, very different. They're all part of this phenomenal system, but yet very different in their own respects. Additionally, developing a strategy to identify those technical and specific skills that are needed to achieve those priority goals. And then as we kind of drill down a little bit further into some of the more nitty-gritty, thinking about gathering information on habitats, species assemblages, how those work together to determine that ecosystem function. And I think through that, we can understand if there's uncertainties and limitations of which we should be aware. And I think what you'll find is that as you start thinking about the various subbasins that exist, there's very different levels of knowledge and collected information that are readily available. So also identifying those key elements for monitoring as indicators of ecosystem function, what are those? And then developing targeted action plans for those. And then we also have establishing the Mississippi River Basin Fishery Commission here. And we really saw that as a priority action because it could really serve as a tool or a means for achieving some of these needed actions for our fish and wildlife resources. Thanks, Kim.
Super. Thanks so much, Angie. All righty, so moving along, our next topic will be inland navigation, and presenting for that group will be Jeff Verisco. Jeff is the head of strategic engagement and communications at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Mississippi Valley Division. Thank you, Jeff.
Hey, Kim, thank you. And thank everybody for being here. Excuse me. Hello from New Orleans. So, yeah, representing the navigation group, appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all today. I got to say up front, what I'm about to present is not necessarily the views of the Corps. So, but the good news is that most of this lines up really nicely with established positions by the Army Corps of Engineers. So, the good and the bad, everybody's probably like typical engineer. So in any case, team composition, yeah, we have a great mix of Fed, state, waterway ports. It's basically what you would expect to see, I think, in a lineup of navigation. And so I'd like to thank those that are on here that have participated in our workshop groups that developed this. Hitting the goals, first of all, I think it's not a surprise, is funding. And this isn't me as a federal employee advocating or lobbying for funds, but certainly the group recognized the need for continued elevated and sustained operation and maintenance funding on our inland waterways. Second point here, data. And 2 points here probably is it's not the best, or maybe it's not as timely as it could be, and that's been recognized especially by the users of the waterways. But I will say, there's probably 2 parts to that. One, you could say, yeah, it's funding or maybe lack of funding. In investing in more modern ways of getting the data. But also we got to be mindful that some of this data is proprietary, and some people don't want to share the information on the waterways. So ongoing goal is to try and clear up the data, and make sure that it's available out there. Third, infrastructure goal, that we all want our locks and dams and bridges, et cetera, to be the best, to be modern. But it goes back again to funding, and there's a high cost. In fact, we're seeing it with a lot of our projects, and I know a lot of you are probably familiar with cost overruns with inflation, supply chain, et cetera. Just the cost of doing business has escalated greatly in the last couple of years. So anyways, the group recognized that we've just got to keep at it with the critical infrastructure on the waterways. Moving over to the actions, priority actions. One, and this kind of goes back to building the education and outreach about what the value of navigation is, of being a multimodal source of pretty much our nation's economy. It really is. It drives it. Second, where practical, we want to combine beneficial use in concert with the traditional navigation mission. Third, identify opportunities where commerce and ecosystem services can work together for the benefit of both missions. And I think for those of you that are probably familiar, the Navigation Ecosystem Sustainability Program is a great model. There's obviously more to be done there, but it's great. And the work that we're doing with UMRBA and UMRR, I think those are all great showcases for what can be done with nav and ecosystem. And then more recently, and I see Angie, so the Hatchie-Loosahatchee on the lower river, there's 7 more of those. So there's obviously more stuff that we can do in the lower river to include ecosystem, but certainly not at the expense of navigation. And I don't think we will. I think they're complementary, even though maybe historically not viewed that way. And then finally, improving tonnage data. There's some new stuff that we're doing at the Corps, bathymetry and whatnot, to get better at forecasting where to dredge, but also talking about, the gee whiz kind of information. WCI does a great job of this. If you follow them on LinkedIn, just giving better numbers, like in showing how important navigation is. And then again, this kind of goes back to the goals of just doing better communication and outreach to let people know how important inland waterways are. So with that, Kim, back to you. Thank you very much.
Super. Thank you, Jeff. Next will be our recreation group, and speaking for recreation will be Sabrina Chandler. Sabrina is U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Area Supervisor and Refuge Manager for the Upper Mississippi River Wildlife and Fish Refuge. Sabrina.
Thanks, Kim. Good morning, everybody from Winona, Minnesota. I'm very happy to talk with you this morning about the priority goals and actions that we came up with in our recreation work group, which had a very diverse representation of federal agencies, nonprofit groups, user groups, and outreach and engagement groups. We had a really great conversation and ultimately ended up with some categories that fell really nicely into advocacy, access, and data and information. We talked a lot about what recreation means and the definition of recreation, because it could be anything from just driving along the Great River Road may be considered recreation for some others, and then those of us who are on the river and work on the river may see it more as a consumptive or a non-consumptive use of paddling or fishing or hunting. And so we spent a really great amount of time of talking about that, and we decided to keep that very broad definition to help us really be more inclusive of anybody who would see themselves recreating on the river, because we all know the more people who love and enjoy the river are going to want to take care of and protect the river. And so that was one of the big high points of our conversation of just where are we looking to include activities and what those might be. And as we kind of drilled down into the conversations of the topics and where we wanted to go, and you can see the actions and goals there on your list, but increasing public awareness of the river and the access to those recreational areas was something really important. And as you've heard from some of my other colleagues here today, it's no secret that the upper and lower rivers are very different, and especially in way people view the river and use the river. So we had some conversations about just myth busting in general, and trying to connect folks to the river and offer the opportunities that might exist even where there may be a perception that nobody uses the river. There may be actual folks that do that. And so using the voices of those people who live in the area, whether they're outfitters or longtime residents, or just general users of the river, to increase that public awareness was something that was really important to our group, and wanted to make sure that was captured as what you can see in that priority goal as a world-class recreation destination. The other thing that we really focused heavily on was the conversation about access. You can't recreate on the river if you can't get to it, and it may not be readily aware to folks that are maybe visiting or traveling through. And so trying to create some sort of clearinghouse of access points along the river and how those could be increased or more strategically used is something that we discussed at length as well. And then of course you have the actions that really rely on impacts to recreation, and that might be navigation, it might be restoration of habitats, it might be just information about water quality, or some other thing that might impact the use of the river. And so incorporating all of that context into our recreation community and allowing that community to inform those activities or be involved in some of those decision making around those activities is something that we really wanted to focus on as a goal. Some of the actions that we've pulled together to make sure of that, I've captured some of those already, but really kind of tying it to that awareness through potential marketing and outreach campaigns. There's some of those things that have been ongoing through for example, the Mississippi River Parkway Commission and the Great River Road, tying their marketing to recreation of the river and sharing that more broadly. But really that clearinghouse and inventory of that existing access, observation points, and an analysis of where we might need more of those and how we can make that happen really kind of rose to the top. And having this more collaborative effort helps us leverage where things have worked well and where they haven't, and how we might use that information to inform projects along the entire river. So very excited to see these priority goals and actions pulled together, and looking for opportunities to increase the conversation as we move forward. So thanks for the opportunity to share from our group today.
Thanks so much, Sabrina. So the last group of goals kind of came up organically as we were going through the issue areas. We recognized people were asking us, well, we've got these specific 5 issue areas, but what about overarching goals for the partnership? So the 4 of us that I mentioned earlier, myself and Sierra from AWI and Liz and Emma from TNC, came up with some overarching partnership goals as well. And I'm not going to read through them, but instead kind of give a flavor for them. So one of the key areas you've heard communicated before, but how can this overarching partnership really communicate both the importance of the watershed economically and environmentally, but also provide more information so the general public, decision makers can really understand better those key issue areas that you just heard articulated: water quality, floods and droughts, inland navigation, fish and wildlife resources, and recreation. We also believe that bringing more funding to the basin is really important, and we fully recognize that not everyone who we have been talking to in this partnership is able to request funds or to advocate for funds, but for those who are, we think that could be an important goal for a subset of groups to really advocate for additional funding in these key areas across the watershed, as well as advocate for specific policies or processes necessary to advance this work. So those are some of the things that that we thought about as priority goals for this group. We also think simply bringing people together. When I say simply, it's not simple to bring people together over 31 states to do meaningful work. It takes a lot of thought, and we've had a great steering committee and consulting partners who have really helped us think through that. But we do think the opportunity to continue to bring people together to convene around specific targeted issues and goals is a key role of such a partnership. You've heard it mentioned before, there's a lot of room for information about data and information. How do we help bring that together? And one of the things that we also really want to dig into as we think about the structure is, what is an overarching set of values that the partnership aims to uphold? And for example, it includes one of those underlying areas for everything that I mentioned earlier is a desire to help the communities that have been most impacted by pollution, environmental harm, storms, et cetera, in this watershed. So how do we craft those values? That's something we think the partnership could be doing. So with that, I want to just say one thing more about the goals. I think I mentioned this at the beginning, but I want to underscore that I think the work that has been done here has been just top notch. We've had experts come together in each of those work groups. You saw the names of who participated in online forums on those work groups, but behind that, we had our planning committee, our consulting partners, and additional folks who reviewed all of those goals. I'll have to admit, we are still working through some of the comments. So what you see here is our best approximation of where we are today, with an effort to get these goals enough of the way along that we can begin to use those to really think about what our structure would be to support actually acting on these goals and actions. So with that, I don't think there were any clarifying questions in the chat. I know there are some questions that were provided. So Heather, should we answer some of the questions that were provided online, or do you want to go ahead and go to the poll?
Let's take a minute and answer some questions. I would encourage you to take a look at the Q&A, and you are welcome to submit a question. You can also submit questions anonymously, although we'd love to know who you are. Alternatively, you can upvote an existing question. So you see a little thumbs up, so that can help us prioritize questions. But Kim has gotten a few questions in advance, and we thought we'd start with those. So go ahead, Kim.
Sure. So we had several questions submitted in advance, so I'll go through those quickly. First was, how will we engage with agencies? And as you saw from the work groups, agencies have already been incorporated into the work groups, and I think there's more opportunity. Again, this is a starter set of goals and actions. All of these will need additional work to turn them into work plans, and who the work will be done by, how to really articulate that. So there's much opportunity to engage in the work groups. There's also an opportunity to socialize the partnership within your agency or within the partnerships you work for. And then finally, another way is to suggest others in your agency, your state, your area of expertise to participate in the partnership. So we'd love your engagement in all of those ways. Another question was, what are 3 things the partnership
Mentioned these before, but
let me give those in a little bit more detail. So I've talked about increasing funding. So what's a specific example of something we might want more funding for? I've been working as part of a large collaborative that's been led by the Nature Conservancy to look at the monitoring needs across the entire basin. There's a great set of USGS gauges across the basin, but when we took a little bit closer look, I'm sorry, I'm getting a message on my machine that maybe you cannot hear me.
We can hear you, Kim, but we can't see you.
Okay. Okay. Well, my video is on, so I'm not quite sure what happened there. Let me change out my camera and see if my other camera will work. Okay. Thank you. So there has been an effort to think about what is that sentinel set of monitoring stations that would be needed to really give us more information in key areas of the basin where monitoring is currently insufficient. So funding could be generated to improve the monitoring system, which not only gives us hydrologic data, water quality data, but we also have in there to improve some of the data to improve safety for the navigation system. Increased collaboration is another thing we hope the partnership will achieve. And really there, we're looking at how existing work could be expanded to address multi-benefit.
One example. So what constellation of green and gray infrastructure projects could be deployed across the basin to address both increased rainfall that's happening in all parts of the basin and water quality? And then increased attention. I think we all agree that the Mississippi River is really important for many, many reasons, but does everyone else know that? So how could the partnership develop those communication tools to provide to others to use to have that collective voice of why we think these issues we've highlighted are important and why the basin itself is important? And Heather, stop me when you think we need to transition. There's 3 more questions we got online.
I think we've got a little bit more time, Kim, if you want to answer 1 or 2 more.
Okay. We got a question about how do we interface with the Lower Mississippi Comp Study. And I think we all recognize this is a really important study being done for the lower part of the basin, but with implications for other parts of the basin. And while the partnership doesn't have a defined role in the study, we have multiple partner organizations that are tracking the study, and we're making sure we're aware of opportunities and synergies and excited about the potential to capitalize on that work being done. And then maybe I'll leave it with this last question for now. If we don't get to your question today, we'll be answering them in written form and sending them out to the partnership. But the question was about ensuring this work is grounded in solid science. And I hope it's been evident both by the overarching goal for the partnership that we produce additional science and data to inform decision-making, that's embedded in every goal. We've included experts in these topical areas in crafting the goals. I think you noted in seeing the goals and actions that science and data were strongly represented across the goals and actions. So I feel confident that the plan will be grounded in the best available science possible. So thank you for submitting those questions, and perhaps we'll have time to get some of the ones online answered before we wrap up today. But I'll turn it back over to Heather.
Great. So we appreciate you all being here and asking good questions. As Kim said, we will get those questions answered one way or another. But we wanted to get a little bit of a deeper understanding of your level of agreement with what we shared today, with the goals and actions as they are still developing, but wanted to get a sense of where you all are on your level of agreement. And this is not a formal endorsement from your organization. This is just a sense of 1 to 5, what level of agreement you have. So Sierra is going to put up a poll in just a second, and you will see it's going to ask, on a scale of 1 to 5, what is your level of agreement with these goals and actions? If you give a lower rating, so a 1, a 2, or a 3, we also want to know what could improve your rating. So for some folks, we know it may be a simple word shift. It may be inclusion of a specific action. We will not be sharing that publicly, but we do want to get a better understanding of what your level of agreement is. And I can see folks voting. Thank you so much. We're going to give you just another 30 seconds or so. And Kim, what do you want to add? All right. Thank you all for your feedback. If you do give us a 1, a 2, or a 3, we'd love to know why. What could improve that rating? What might make this more aligned with how you see the work moving forward? We've gotten about 70 folks who have shared their feedback so far. We're going to give you just another few seconds here. All right. And then Sierra, as we end this poll, I'm wondering if we can share with the full group the answer to number 1, the answer to the first question. Okay, last chance. All right. Sarah, let's end the poll and share the answers first. Great. So we can see here, thankfully we don't have any 1s, but we do have some 2s, so some room for improvement. Mostly 3s, 4s, and 5s. So thank you. It seems like this group is mostly aligned. We also had 34 people share what could improve your rating. So we are going to take a look at that and really try to understand how to make this an even stronger set of starter goals and actions. So we're going to stop sharing that. The last piece that we wanted to ask you all as we get a sense of your response to this is we want to ask you to share with us a little bit about what of these goals and activities excites you. We might ask you just to share that in the Q&A and just share a little bit about what excites you. We might read off a couple of these. So if you don't mind, share those. We also had a couple of questions, Kim, as folks are typing what excites you about these goals and actions. One of the questions that came in is, who are the partnership members and how could our organization become a part of the partnership? So Kim, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, the partnership is open to anyone who wants to be a part of it. And on our last slide that you received, if you registered for the partnership, you got an email from Sierra this morning that has the final slide is how do I sign up to be part of the partnership? In closing, I'll be saying what some of the next steps are and where you can expect to hear from us, but just give us your contact information, and that's as simple as that.
Great. Thank you. So we also have a question here from Scott about, have we thought about where local flash flooding originates and how we can identify the highest potential flood areas?
Gosh, great question. I'm probably not the one to be able to answer this very specifically, but we have multiple people on the floods and droughts team who have hydrologic expertise or modeling expertise. I am aware of a very new study that's being done by the University of Minnesota. Some researchers there to look very specifically. I think they've got census tract level data on where flooding is occurring in the upper basin, and they're hoping to expand that to other parts of the basin. So I think that's something that in that bucket of data needed to make actionable change that we're aware of and interested in learning more about.
Thank you, Kim. So thanks also to folks who are sharing what they're excited about in the Q&A. We've heard the holistic approach. That people are excited about the big picture, comprehensive coordination of the efforts. People are excited about recreation as a way to grow public support of the watershed. Compliments to the fish and wildlife goals and actions. They seem particularly well developed. Excited about improved communication and understanding about what's happening on the larger scale. So thank you for sharing those excitements. We also have a couple of folks who have their hands raised. So I wonder if we want to quickly go to them and then Kim, back to you for a little wrap up. All right, Brian. Do you want to share your question? Brian Stenquist.
I'm sorry, which question in particular?
Well, you had raised your hand, so I'm wondering if you
I must have done it inadvertently. I'm sorry.
No problem, Brian. Sorry to call on you out of the blue. All right. Well, Kim, do you want to tell us a little bit about next steps?
Yes, and Sierra, can we get that last slide or second to last slide up on the screen? Okay, so we have some specific next steps in mind. We have drafted a document for the Trump transition team. We're waiting to hear who those people might be in our particular areas of interest before it gets sent. But in large part, this document talks about the importance of the river system, both economically and environmentally, and talks about the broad strokes of the partnership. And when I say broad strokes, simply that there is a group of people talking together about the importance of this watershed, and we're hoping to initiate a conversation about how we might work with the new administration. So that's in process. Many of you know we are planning an organizational structure workshop in January. It's going to be a much smaller workshop because this is really detailed work. So we have about 40 folks invited and are planning to attend a workshop to really take these goals and actions and think, what could be an organizational structure that would work for this basin? We've also done a lot of legwork on characteristics of ideal partnerships. We've looked at numerous examples across the country. So we'll be coming into that workshop with some examples for people to look at, as well as this list of what makes a successful collaboration at a watershed scale. We know that that workshop is the starting point, not the ending point. So we'll be hoping to come back out to all of you and socialize the findings from that workshop and help improve and refine it, and to gain support for this effort and for our proposed direction on that organizational structure. We're going to continue to refine goals and actions. I think I saw some of that in the questions. Specifically, where are there synergies? You saw some kind of common themes: need for data, need for communications, advocacy where appropriate. So where are those synergies? And let's also look, are there any conflicting ideas across our goals? Let's be mindful of that. And pay attention to that as well. So again, you're seeing the starting point of goals and actions, not the end point. Someone asked about how to join. We are open and want to continue to grow to add to the list of folks who are interested in this concept of a Mississippi River-wide collaborative. And then the last piece is, some of you may be aware there is a corporate initiative that is gaining traction. It's being led by the CEO Water Mandate Group, which is a group of CEOs who have pledged support for water quality, water quality and quantity goals, as well as access to clean water. And what we have said back to them numerous times is, please join us, be a part of this. How do we make our goals your goals? And that effort is ongoing. And as that gets more formalized, I'll be able to say more about how our corporate partners might join this coalition in ways to help us get that work done on the ground. So those are just a few examples. Liz and I met earlier this week to kind of chart out the entire year. So know that these are our starter set, and we're looking forward to working with all of you. We're building this together. We're just helping guide the ship and provide these touch points, but we're really developing this with you. And someone had asked, how do you find more information? Sierra is really our contact point. There is a lot of information on the AWI website. You see the link there where you can see the report from the summer, the video we showed today, and whatnot, and then a form there to be added to the partnership list. So Heather, any final words?
No, just to say thank you to everyone for being here, for sharing your feedback. If you have additional feedback, please do email Sierra. We will definitely take that into consideration.
Yeah, I probably should have said that in the summary of actions. We will answer your questions that you put in the Q&A today, and we'll summarize the feedback. So everyone who signed up will get that feedback as well. So thank you so much for your time today. I know an hour is a precious amount of time, and I really appreciate you staying with us, and look forward to more opportunities to connect in the new year. Thank you again.
Thanks, everybody.